Hello, everybody. We are live. This is so exciting. We're live streaming on YouTube. This is the first of the Sierra Commons speaker series, food business speaker series. And we're real excited for the concept in general because it gives us a way to create a database and have a presence beyond just our classes. This one is woven into your food accelerator track A. And because we know and we've heard repeatedly from food entrepreneurs in general, food entrepreneurs that have participated in past food accelerators with Sierra Commons, the importance of understanding the finances. How do you control your costs? What's my entry step into bookkeeping for my small food business, or hey, your large food business as you're growing? So, with that in mind, we're real excited to have someone that Robert, the founder, executive director of Sierra Commons, knows from the SBDC office it's the Sierra. It's called the Sierra SBDC office, and it covers Nevada County and I think a couple other counties in your area as well. And that is Tim Yamauchi. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Did I get
Nailed
that?
it. You
Okay,
nailed it.
cool. So, it looks like we have a few more folks joining us, so I'm hoping that they'll show up very soon. In the meantime, I've introduced the concept. Let me go on to the next slide. Just say, yes, this is creative cost controls. For us, it's the third class in our Track A series of the Food Accelerator. For a speaker series, this is the inaugural event, which is just so great. We've got an online marketing expert coming up. We've got a food trendologist next year. We at the beginning of the year for January. What better time of year to look at food trends? We've got packaging design experts. So we've got a really great, robust series of guest experts that we're going to be having coming soon. But back to tonight, creative cost controls. A little bit about Tim. And then Tim, before we get into your slides, like I said, I am going to give you a quick intro to who our folks are, so you get a little understanding of who's in tonight's class. So Tim he's an inactive CAPA, but hey, Harvard MBA. I'm sorry, that's with you for life, right? Principal at Inside the Mountain LLC, which is, your email is Inside the Mountain. So I believe that's your active company. You've got 35 years, high growth, innovation business, variety of industries. We are especially happy that that includes the food business. And I'll let everybody read the rest of this on their own, but the fact that you have a variety of food industry experiences, food and beverage, food processing, and consumer packaged goods, and you're an SBDC advisor. So I sent out to everyone in the class today a little packet with instructions of how to sign up for SBDC services, and that'll be the way you can get a one-on-one with Tim. If you've mastered everything after tonight's class, that's great, but you probably will have some more questions. So Tim, before I go to your first slide, let me give you a little bit of insight into who we have in our class. And I'm just looking at the images of the folks that are here. I can see Bia. We have somebody else joining us. That's great. Bia Navarro has Brazilian Bites, and she has been a caterer. She's been making Brazilian breads. She's been doing a lot of private chef work. So she will most likely be working out of a commissary kitchen. We've got Luke Sweeney, I think is your last name. I hope I have that right. Luke makes bagels, and he'll be working most likely out of a commissary kitchen as well. So those are two small-ish businesses. Rachel has a really great vision for an energy bar, and she'll be working with a co-packer. So that's kind of a bigger project. She's got a lot of her details lined up. She's going to be working on her flavor profiles in the course of this class. And now let me introduce and then Robert Watts has a soup stock business. Robert's a very experienced chef. He works out of a commissary kitchen in Truckee called Kitchen Collab. Patricia has a farm, Two Redwoods Farm, and she has a food trailer, Wild Fork Trailer. So she'll be doing all sorts of food truck events. Now let me introduce the sort of outer heaven team. Wendy, I believe you're the founder, correct? Yeah. So we've got Wendy, we've got Dylan, we've got Bill, and I'm not sure if Jamie is going to be here tonight, but they've got a team of brick and mortar espresso coffee company. They've got people here on the team. One of them's a barista and the roaster. One of them is the finance person and also working on a subscription model delivery, and then someone also in social media. So, and then hopefully Aaron will be joining us. Aaron is a cottage foods maker, and hopefully I didn't miss anyone. Salem is also working on bagels. I'm not sure if she's with us here tonight. All right, so that gives you a little overview, Tim, I hope. So with that in mind, I'm going to go to the first slide and let you take it away, and I will move the slides when you're ready.
Thank you, Monty. Thank you. Well, hey, everybody, welcome. Thank you for spending part of your evening today with me. Um, so here's the thing. My presentation style is one of usually I just do like relatively minimal slides, and I really need some class participation. Otherwise, we can all probably get out of here in like 20 minutes. So it depends on how riveting I am as I discuss this. But feel free to ask questions. I think in order to just maintain a semblance of order, I think Monty had asked that we put them in the chat, and then he's going to stop me. But we'll try to keep this as interactive as possible. So I'll tell you something funny. So last night I was watching some mindless Netflix TV, and they have this show. It's called Gentified. Has anybody seen it? Here's the plot, and I guess it kind of resonated with me. It's a third generation Mexican American family in East Los Angeles that has a taqueria, and the whole storyline is they're basically losing the taqueria because they can't make rent. And there's lines in there like, well, just raise the burritos 50 cents and all this other type of stuff. And then, as I'm watching this, it made me start thinking about today and the discussion we're about to have, because, this is, the food business is a tough business, right? It's one of those kind of businesses where, typically it's not huge margins. And what I mean by that is your profitability, a lot of times as a percent of revenue, is probably in the low to upper mid single digits, right? And again, it depends, but typically this is what we see, which means there's not a lot of room for error. And one of the biggest things I run into, and one of the things I didn't list, is there's a whole litany of smaller food businesses that have advised while I've been an SBDC advisor. And one of the common themes of is as Monty alluded to, is just being able to get your head around like, okay, what are my economics? What do my financials really look like? So what I wanted to do today was not necessarily inundate you with a ton of numbers, but give you more some concepts to think about and why you need some of this stuff. Because again, it's not necessarily intuitively obvious for most people. So that's why we're jumping into this. So first of all, question that I want to make, that I want to ask you guys, how many of you guys are in this to make money? Maybe just as a show of hands. Yeah, I can't see your hands. Did you raise your hand?
Yep, I'm starting to see. Yeah, I'm starting to see the hands and the thumbs up and the yes. Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Oh, yes, we can see a lot of hands.
Oh, right. Okay, now here we
I
go.
don't think anyone's doing this as just a hobby, Tim. I think they want to make some money too.
Okay, well, here, let me put a point on this. How many of you are in this, and again, kind of show of hands or thumbs, how many are you doing this just to pay your bills? No? Okay, good. How many of you are doing this to like make some money in terms of eventually selling the business or doing some kind of exit with the business? One, two, three. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
It's interesting. Yeah, we
definitely.
got a lot of thumbs now. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, this is the hard part with Zoom, right? It's all kind of like delayed as it comes flying through. One of the things, you guys know Kevin Looney from Shark Tank? right? He's one of the sharks. One of the things he talked about was what makes this country great is we have equity. We own our businesses, and you're able to actually realize something. Because really, at the end of the day, this is where you make your money. But one of the things I found so often is a lot of, particularly food entrepreneurs that I've run into, they're just paying the bills. All right. So part of what I'm also trying to emphasize here is how do you create that long-term enterprise value into your business? Okay, as you think about where you want to go with this next. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Ah, I got to bring the cursor back. Oh, there we go.
Oh,
Oh,
you already know about
we
this
did your
part.
stuff.
Yeah,
Okay, how about this, the basics? Does that look good?
yeah. No, this is great. This is great. Okay, so given that I've got a bunch of different businesses here that in different stages of growth and even in different business lines, I'm trying to give you guys more concepts here. Okay. In fact, I know Monty's going to get into some of like the food costing type of stuff. But right now, I think what's really important is you guys understand, some of these very fundamental ideas. Like, first of all, what are financial statements? Why do you need them? Right. And then also, how do you take this raw data and how do you turn it into information? All right. Meaning into financial statements. So I'm going to kind of talk about this at a high level and maybe talk about some of those decisions that you guys are going to make as early stage food entrepreneurs in terms of what you're doing. Okay. And then at the end, I'm going to just kind of give you some, like, I call it pro tips, but this is stuff I run into on a regular basis that, are challenges that I think people run into, and maybe also some words of wisdom that I've kind of collected along the way. Okay, next slide.
There we go.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so when you think about financial statements, by the way, how many of you guys know about financial statements? Anybody? One, maybe two? Okay. All right, so let me kind of go through the three major financial statements and why you need them. Oh, Wendy, you got your hand raised?
I think she was just answering your question.
Oh, I see, I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's one. Yeah, that's one thing about Zoom. You raise your hand, it stays up.
Yeah, no, we're still working on the whole
Yeah,
signaling thing.
yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. Anyways, all right. So the first one that I want to make sure we cover. Now, everybody knows the income statement, also known as the profit and loss. And the purpose of this financial statement is it tells you how much revenue, sales that you brought in, and how much you spent for a period, okay, over a certain period of time. Um, I'd recommend that you guys look at this monthly at a minimum. Um, I know some clients that I've run into, if you can believe this, they didn't get these until a year later when they got their tax returns. As you can probably imagine, they're having a lot of financial problems right now. Pretty hard to fix this. So this is like kind of like something you guys want to look at regularly is your income statement, also known as your profit and loss. In its most simplest terms, it's your revenues minus your expenses, okay, which includes food costs and what have you. Now, the other financial statement, and I'll tell you what's kind of interesting as we work our way left to right. A lot of times, I'll ask people's bookkeepers, I want to see the balance sheet, and they've never seen it. I had a client that was trying to sell his company the other day, and I said, "Have you seen your balance sheet?" He goes, "What are you talking about? I've never seen it." And he's been working with his bookkeeper for 4 or 5 years. What the balance sheet is, it's a financial snapshot as of a certain date, and usually it's the end of like a year or a quarter, right? So 12/31, December 31st, September 30th. You usually have a balance sheet, but you should have a balance sheet as of every month end. Okay. And it shows you what your assets and your liabilities and equities are, and you see the little equation in there, assets equals liabilities plus equity. Okay, everybody understands what assets are, right? Yeah. Like in the food business, that'd be things like your inventory, if you have equipment, all that kind of good stuff. The other side, and cash, by the way, cash sits on the asset side. Um, oh, you like that one, huh, Bia? Is that way I got a thumbs up on the assets and the cash? Okay, all good. Thank you. On the liability side, this is what you owe people. Okay, and liabilities plus equity equals assets. Equity is like how much you own in the business. All right, and that's what the balance sheet. And notice they put the balance sheet balances. So when you look at total assets and you look at liabilities and equity, that's how they display it. And those numbers should be the same. Okay. And the last one, and this is the one I would say 95% of the clients that I run into have never seen this statement. It's called the statement of cash flows, right? And there's a lot of noise in the way accountants keep track of things. And what I mean by that, as an example, there's this thing called depreciation expense. You guys heard of that? Okay, basically when you buy, like let's say you buy an oven, right? And it'll work for 10 years and you spent $10,000. It's $1,000 charge that comes through every year as you depreciate it. The issue with that is it kind of distorts your numbers a little bit. And really at the end of the day, to me, this is the most important statement.
Hmm.
Okay, and I'm going to talk about this more later. But cash, you guys have heard the phrase, pardon me, ladies, but cash is king, right? Everybody, you got to keep an eye on your cash. And I'm going to kind of get into this even more. So, all right, before I leave this, any questions on this? And by the way, I'm just hitting this thing at 100,000 feet right now because I want to introduce you to the concepts. But as you get in more and more into your business, you're going to say, like, oh, yeah, that's what Tim was talking about. All right. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, Monty, if we can, well, here, before we flip the slide,
Sure.
why do you think we need financial statements? And I don't know if we can open this up for a quick discussion. Anybody want to hazard a guess why you need financial statements?
Oh, yeah. Take yourself off mute and let's hear your thoughts. Wendy?
Well, for me, it gives me a sense of what my business is actually doing beyond just looking at my bank account, which I look at every day. I do not look at these other financial statements. So I will now.
Well, by the way, Wendy, I appreciate your comment because one of the things, and by the way, first of all, you should look at your bank account. This way you know if you're getting ripped off or not to start with. But it's also something where you should have an idea what's going in and out of your bank account, which is fine. But, again, this should be really kind of how you keep score because on a day in, day out basis, right? This needs to be kind of looked at in a broader fashion. And now you're understanding like the full kind of scope, right, of what your financials need to look like. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Why do you need financial statements?
If you wanted to sell the business,
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. And you probably need more than one, right? You need multiple years usually.
And
Anybody else?
just to give you context, Robert is our chef and soup stock maker, and Wendy is with the Outer Heaven Espresso group.
Okay.
Anyone want to take themselves off mute and make a comment for Tim's question?
I think the very important thing to keep all the statements it is also to get grants and loan. If you have everything organized, so it's easier for them to understanding what you're coming from instead of coming out of the blue and expect to have a support.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
For me, the other thing is, and this is really important, is I need to know what my break even is. So that's going to help me figure out, what revenue we need to bring in order to get to profitability. And that's really kind of my watermark for how are we doing? And I look at that, I would say I look at my break even almost on a weekly basis because I
Yeah.
do have some fluctuation in my labor. So I'm trying to, I'm trying to get a handle on right now I'm kind of in the trenches and I mean, these statements that you're talking about are more strategic and I want to get to that place to be more
Well,
strategic.
I'll tell you, Wendy, one of the things I actually do, even with like much, much bigger companies, I still track cash every day.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. So because you need to make sure you have enough liquidity, and I'll get into that. So you're going to want to do both, right?
Okay.
Ideally. Okay. So here, let me flip the page here. And by the way, you guys are doing great. That was awesome.
We have one
Oh,
more. Rachel had her hand up.
oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, hi.
Hi,
Yeah,
Rachel.
I think it's very important that where all the pennies are. I think that's critical. And I think I've seen some people with businesses, they work in the business but not on the business, so they're not taking minding the store, the financial store. And so, I think that's just really a big deal.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. In fact, one of the things, the common theme for most of the successful food businesses I know is they have their arms around this.
Mhm.
They have a really good understanding of the financial position of the business, both small and large. So, why don't you flip the page, please?
Yeah. And let's see, while I'm flipping that page, it's so interesting. My last business, Tim, a financial advisor that I worked with always looked at the cash flow and the balance sheet. I always looked at the P&L because P&L, I wanted to see what was going on with my labor. I wanted to see, am I paying too much for my paper goods? But he always looked at those other two, and I'd look at those and think, okay, yeah, that's going to be important come tax time. But I always had a hard time wrapping my head around those others. But the P&L, I prided myself on getting a handle on.
Well, the P&L for near-term operations obviously is very important. But in terms of positioning the companies for some of these, like selling your business or, trying to position it for borrowing or attracting investment, that's where these other statements are so critical. So I just kind of came up with a laundry list here, and I think you guys hit some of these. Let me hit a couple highlights though that really jumped out at me. You know, um, I ran into clients over the pandemic that didn't have either good quality financial statements or they didn't have them at all. And they didn't get a PPP and they didn't get an idle. I don't know if you guys know, but the payment protection program was basically a grant. They called it a loan. But if you had that ability to access those, I know companies that got hundreds of thousands of dollars from this. So, but they had to have financial statements. And the EIDL is, the EIDL is the emergency um, disaster loan. And that one was also something that there's no way you're going to get it. Okay. We talked about attracting equity, right? Those are investors. Um, and then some of the other stuff, if you get into like selling to really big corporate entities, sometimes they may ask how financially viable you are as a business. Okay. So again, these are all the reasons why. Um, okay. So I think we all agree this is pretty important, right? Especially coming back to my initial question is how many guys you want to make money? This is how I keep score. Okay. And without it, I know a lot of people working out of shoe boxes, but they don't get very far after a while. Okay. Okay, Monty, next slide, please.
Sure.
Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. So one of the problems is, so you got all this activity going on in your business day in and day out, but how do you translate this into financial information, meaning out of the data? All right. And the way I like to think about this, and by the way, this goes for any information system, but right now we're just going to focus on financial statements. it's kind of this three-legged stool, all right, of people, processes, and by the way, can you guys hear me? I just got a
You're getting a little
messages flashed
fuzzy.
up. So stable. You guys
There's a little bit of electronic
can you
interference.
guys hear me?
We can hear you. Your face
Hello?
froze.
Okay.
Up now you're moving again.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm moving again. Okay, good. Good. It's always good to move. Right? So here, I don't know where you lost me. So let me just kind of restart this slide.
Sure.
So one of the things about your business is day in, day out. You got all this activity going on, right? People making food, you're selling food, what have you. And how do you translate this into information? Because out of all that activity, there's data that's being derived. Okay. And so the way I like to think about this, and this is a very common way to think about systems, is it's a three-legged stool: people, processes, and technology. I'll tell you the interesting thing is everybody blames the technology, but I will tell you 90% of the time it's people and process problems. So I just want to spend a few minutes kind of covering this concept as you think about this. So as you start thinking about the systems that you're going to put into your businesses, you can use this kind of intellectual construct of how maybe you approach this. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about that people side of this three-legged stool, right? So I like to think about it as you got external people, internal people, and you. And I'm going to kind of spend a few minutes on each one of these. So the first thing is, a lot of times when I meet with clients, I ask them, all right, who are your professionals? What's your external team, right? Ideally, you're going to have some combination of these. Okay, and I want to spend a couple minutes on each one. So bookkeepers are like financial historians. They tend to be looking backwards, and they take your information and they will help you prepare your work. And it's not really, there's not a ton of analysis that goes into this. Just take your numbers and you put them into your accounting systems. All right. I will tell you, I've had varying levels of success with bookkeepers. In fact, one of the ways I often ask bookkeepers to see how good they are, it's like, what do you provide your clients on a regular basis for financial? Because what I'm looking for, the right answer is, I give them a complete set of financial statements every month. But as I told you, I run into clients where they didn't get anything until their tax returns were due.
Right.
Okay. So, again, check your bookkeepers, make sure what they're giving you makes sense. All right. Now, let's talk about CPAs and accountants for a second. So CPA stands for Certified Public Accountant. All right. And by the way, this really has nothing to do with for you guys, because what that CPA stands for is it allows them to audit financial statements. I don't know that any of you guys are in need of an audit right now. All right. But they can also do tax returns. So a lot of times you may have CPAs as your doing your tax returns. Okay. And then they also have, and I didn't put this on here, they call them EAs, as enrolled agents. And these people can also do your tax returns. But again, I don't know that they're really helping you that much with the running of your business. There are some CPAs out there that can help you with this. All right. Now, the other member of this team that I think you guys are going to need at some point is a lawyer to help you with things like your contracts and what have you. The SBDC could actually make referrals, but again, as with all professionals, they're not created equal. And then you may along the way have a variety of different consultants, but these are kind of like your external resources. Okay. And by the way, for you, those peers that you have that are making money, that have successful food businesses, they typically know who to work with, right? I've had some really difficult situations to deal with when I have clients that, like, for example, it's not in this state, but in another state in the Pacific Northwest, This guy went to his local bar association in Washington, basically got a lawyer that gave him advice that's still taken him about a year to unravel. So it's really important you try to find some quality help. Okay. So again, those are kind of like your external teams. The internal teams, so your employees should be helping you with this. A lot of times they may be entering information. Think things like paychecks or their time cards and what have you. Those help feed the accounting systems. And then you're also going to have independent contractors who you guys are going to be paying through accounts payable or your checking accounts. These are other people that are going to be helping you. And when I mean helping you also, it's things like taking physical inventories. It's things like entering information into the system as they like make batches and what have you. So again, it depends on what your processes are. Okay, and this last one is you. And the reason why I put you guys, there's a couple things that I want you guys to think about, and I run into this over and over and over again. First of all, a lot of entrepreneurs I know, when they start, they're not paying themselves, and they don't know when they're going to pay themselves. Okay, that's not good. All you guys raised your hand and said you want to make money. Well, you're working for free. That's not making money. That's costing you money, right? In terms of opportunity cost. And a lot of people have this question like, well, I'm building my business, so therefore I shouldn't pay myself. But you really need to think about how you're going to get paid. Okay. I think it was Wendy that talked about her break even. My assumption is Wendy is got herself covered in there somewhere if she's thinking about break even, because she knows I gotta sell enough, right? The other one that I see about you is, and by the way, when I say you, don't personalize this. This is not about you guys individually or what have you. But this is something that I just find recurring themes with entrepreneurs that I think really hurt them in the long run. So I put this thing down. I have a fool for a client. One of the problems I run into a lot of times is there's a ton of clients I run into that do their own books. Suffice it to say, they're a mess and they're not very good. I have other ones that have decided they're going to do their own systems implementations, and they've never done that before. So of course it doesn't work right. And then they blame the system, right? But I think the question I would encourage you guys to think about is there something that you can do of higher value? And usually what that means is there a way that you can generate revenue? In fact, it's kind of interesting. I was just thinking about this. I have a client right now who they run a restaurant bar type situation, and the one partner is always running out to buy groceries at the local grocery store. Now, this guy has an IT background. And when I ask him about like, hey, can't you like refine your customer list so you can do more outreach? He doesn't do that. He goes to the grocery store a couple hours every day. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that just kills you when you think about your business, right? And then the last one, this is more a commentary about delegation. But a lot of entrepreneurs I run into have this like nobody does it better syndrome. They won't delegate it. And again, when you start thinking about, can I do something of higher value? Probably, but they won't give it to somebody else. So anyway, so just something to think about as we kind of work through this. Any questions on this slide before I move on? No? Okay. Is this resonating with you guys at all? Yeah. Okay, good. Okay. Okay. All right, next slide, please. All right, so under processes, and you're probably wondering like, okay, what the hell are processes? And since you guys were all in a bunch of different businesses, I decided to opt for, and this is a really high level representation, but everybody knows KFC, right? Kentucky Fried Chicken. And basically, when you think of processes, these are all of the steps in your business that basically take that product before you buy it to your dinner table, right? To your customer's dinner table, and all those steps in the middle. And within each one of these boxes that you see on here are basically business processes. And each one of those typically has some kind of financial implication as it relates to your business. Now, your business processes, I think, are going to be a lot more straightforward, but substantially not that different. It's just a totally different level of scale, right? For those of you, and I think there's a number of you that already have like operating businesses. And as you look at each one of these, whether it's the support activities here or all those like inbound logistics, the operations, right? Outbound logistics, sales and marketing, these are all functions that you got to do, right? In order to make your business successful. This is what I mean by business processes. And as you start to develop these are things that you can actually track in your financial statements. Okay, so you can see how effective they are. You can see how much they're costing you, right? So critical understanding your business processes. All right, let me stop for just 1 second before I get to the technology one. Any questions, comments? Not making sense, by the way, is fair game kind of comment too, by the way. Yeah, no.
Let me ask a question.
Please.
You mentioned that some small business owners you've seen that do their own books are a mess. Compare that with the kind of just ubiquity of QuickBooks and how many QuickBook trainings are out there. What tips can you give people that are a small business that maybe they want to have that, CPA do their taxes at the end of the year, but they really just don't, they don't yet have the income or the sales to support an ongoing bookkeeper or something. Can you give any, and it doesn't have to be QuickBooks. They're the most well-known. There's plenty of systems. And I would just love your thoughts on that, to not be that person that's a fool for a client, but that is doing their own books, other than maybe taking some bookkeeping classes.
Yeah, so here's what I'd focus on. What you need to think about is like what's important to your specific business. Okay, meaning let's break down like the income statement for a second. Obviously, you want to know what your revenues are. Okay, and then you might want to break it down maybe a tad further. Here, I'm going to pick on Wendy because Wendy, you run this, and you've been like kind of participating a lot, I can tell. So this whole thing about like running coffee and all that type of stuff. You probably also have like baked goods that you sell in your shops. Okay, so I would think at a minimum you're going to want to have a breakdown between like maybe the different types of drinks that you may offer. You're going to have a breakdown of like baked goods, and maybe there's baked goods you buy and baked goods that you make. I don't know, right?
Yep.
They all have different margins, okay, in terms of the cost of sales, right? So that's just a simple breakdown. And then you're going to have also like direct staff. And part of what I'm trying to outline here is how you design that QuickBooks structure so that it actually gives you the information you need. All right, and this is what I meant by like some of the installation and setup. Because a lot of times what people do is, QuickBooks, and I'll tell you what the tip off here is, because by the way, QuickBooks is great, but it has to be set up right. But the tip off to me of QuickBooks where nobody set it up is when your expenses are alphabetized. Okay? Because you can't tell where the gross profit margin is. And by the way, I think, Monty, you're going to get into that, right, in your presentation. But you can't tell like how much your cost of product is. A lot of times your labor may be buried all in one line. But then, is that like, the line workers? Is that management? So being able to kind of understand what's important and what drives your business. So that would be kind of the key indicator. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with QuickBooks, guys. Nothing at all. In fact, I would suggest that you guys all take a look at it. The challenge with it is because it's inexpensive, because it's kind of like it's like the Swiss Army knife of accounting software. It does everything, but it doesn't do it great, right?
And the takeaway I heard you say was it has to be set up right. If it's not set up
That's
right from the beginning, it's not going to give you usable data.
that's right. That's right.
I don't want to hog this section. Someone else on the Outer Heaven team, Dylan, has their hand up.
Yeah, Dylan, please.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could give a few examples of what inbound logistics and outbound logistics look like for a food business.
Well, a lot of times for these guys inbound, they have like warehousing, right? You know, they'll have like central warehouses, uh, and then they may do processing. You know, a lot of like intermediate processing of the food. Like Starbucks is notorious for this, right? They freeze all their stuff. They may bake it, cook it, freeze it, and then outbound logistics is then getting it to the local stores on the ground, right? Um, so that's kind of maybe a sample of like inbound versus outbound logistics.
For a smaller food business, Tim, could inbound be the things that you need to order, even the time you spend, scheduling your staff, and then outbound is delivering food, delivering a catering job, making food that you're going to sell at a farmer's market. That's outbound.
Yep, that could
Okay.
be outbound.
Okay.
Yeah, that
Thank
could
you.
be outbound. Yeah, especially too. I think Monty, you mentioned there's a number of people that have ghost kitchens. Those
Well,
ghost kitchens are going to be like your
commissary.
operations.
Yeah,
Right,
commissary kitchens. Yeah.
right, right.
Production,
Those type of
shared
things.
kitchen.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
We're going to just call that commissary for the kind of the big umbrella.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be another example. But I think you guys are getting the concept. Okay.
Thank you.
And by the way, when you do all that, don't you think you want to know what this stuff is costing you? Right? In order to make a landed, price to the customer. Okay. All right. So let me keep going. Next slide, please.
There we go. Was that the one?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So here, one of the things, let me point this out though. So I typed into Gemini. How many guys use Google and now have been getting all the Gemini AI type stuff? All right. So here, by the way, first thing, use the technology. If you can use AI for stuff, queries, what have you, do it. So I went in and I just said, hey, I've got a variety of different food businesses. If you were going to suggest a tech stack, what are the components? Okay. And by and large, this is probably what I would have done, but just let me kind of lay this out here. And I'll tell you why the required, super helpful, and to scale is my editorializing. But I will tell you why I ranked them this way. And then we'll talk about some of the considerations. So the required, you kind of have to have some type of accounting. And if you have employees, you need to have payroll, right? The state of California is really weird about if you don't pay your employees. You don't want to go there. Okay.
Yeah.
And you want to pay them legally and correctly because the paycheck penalties could be breathtaking. Okay. So you got to have it. And this is also how you get your tax returns done, right? Death and taxes. Doesn't matter if you're in the food business or not. You still got to pay taxes if you're making money. The other one that I see that a lot of people tend to skip in the food business, especially when they're starting out, is inventory management. And this is where, by the way, QuickBooks is not always great. All right. It doesn't really do a good job for you, especially if you need to get down to product by product or product line type costing. I haven't seen great solutions. I think there's add-ons and there may be really good ones. I just haven't seen it.
Mhm.
But again, that's a consideration, and to me, that's like a requirement, right? And I'll get into more about inventory management in a second. And then the other thing is, I think this is required today. You need a website, okay? Because this is kind of like your billboard for your business. And when you refer people to it and what have you, ideally you have some kind of website. All right, so that's kind of like your base level of what they call the technology stack. The next piece that I think is pretty helpful, and I don't know how many of you have this, but point of sale systems, like Clover, I mean, there's a whole litany of these. Stripe. These are pretty good things to have. And a lot of times they even tie into some of your inventory management type stuff. So this is really good to have in terms of credit card processing and all that. You can do it without. By the way, in that Netflix Gentified, the guy's got a sign in front of his old school cash register. It says cash only. Do you know how much business he's missing out on? So, anyways, point of sale. Um, I like the notion of online ordering. I think this was one of those critical items during the pandemic that kind of separated a lot of the survivors from those that didn't. Okay. And then the last one is if you have employees, employee scheduling. And sometimes that goes with your payroll system. But one of the things that you can spend a ton of time on, and it just eats you alive, especially as a manager for your managers, is employee scheduling.
Yeah.
And then the last point I want to make, and this is one where for those of you that ultimately want to sell your business, a lot of times having that relationship with your customer, and you'll hear these referred to as CRM systems, but being able to know who they are, often do they show up, what do they buy, what do they like, yada, 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 yada. This is valuable. And a lot of times people will look to see how many customers you have. Okay. Absolutely critical as you think about your business. Now, starting out, I'd kind of focus on those top ones, but as you go through and you start to think about how am I going to make money in this business, this is what you're considering. Wendy, you got your hand up.
Yeah.
I do. I really struggle with online ordering. Or even phone ordering, because in our business, we're a small shop and we're busy. Somebody calls in an order or does an online order, the drink gets made, it can sit out there, and then it's not going to be the quality that we are known for. And so I have basically said, we don't do it. I had a guy call me this morning and he kind of got a little irked. He says, "Yeah, I'd like to place an order." I said, "Well, we don't do phone orders." And let me tell you why. And he said, "Well, I'm your neighbor." But he did. He got irked. And I thought, God, well, maybe I should reconsider this. But I don't know. I don't know. I struggle with it. So help me unstruggle with it.
In a restaurant that I worked at, we simplified our menu to counter that. Like the more complicated things weren't available online versus things that had like a longer shelf life.
Right. Well, for us, it's coffee. So if somebody's ordering a latte, that's lattes and Americanos are like our number one sellers. And so somebody orders an Americano and they don't show up for 20 minutes. It's cold. And then we either have to remake it to keep them happy, or they're going to make up stories about not getting a good coffee at our shop. So it's that I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, that's kind of a tough one. I'm not sure that I've got like a silver bullet answer for you. Um, sometimes I've seen in other businesses where it's more about managing customer expectations then,
Yeah.
right? Now, obviously, you can't give them an ice cold coffee when they ordered a latte, right?
Right.
So, uh, maybe it's putting some of the responsibility, which is always weird, back onto the customer and just saying, hey, look, you need to pick this up in 10 minutes, or can you call me so that you're going to be here because we want to give you the best product we can, that type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That one's a tricky one, because we still have a line and we've got people that are coming in. I had an experience. Okay. I'll confess. I went to Starbucks. It was 5 o'clock in the morning and I was on a bean run, but I pulled in to the parking lot because they had a big line for their cars. And I thought, well, I'll go in, they'll have a shorter line. I ordered my coffee, got in, no line inside. I waited and I waited. And about 10 minutes later, I said, "Hey, what's the deal? I'm watching the cars all go through." And they couldn't even help their customers in store. So it's like, so if somebody calls in an order, it's kind of like me walking into a Starbucks thinking I'm going to get a drink right away, but there are customers in front of me that I don't know about. And it's yeah, it's a whole big thing for me.
The drive-through became their priority, huh?
Yep.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think,
And that's not
yeah,
us. That is so not us. Well, we don't have a drive-through, but it's not
yeah.
us anyway.
I think Jason has his hand up.
Yes, I do. I just wanted to, if people haven't watched the show The Bear, it is, it was very fascinating for me to watch, but it
Yeah.
really discusses a lot of things that Tim is describing of like really understanding the payroll and the costing and the supply chains and just the ins and outs of running a dysfunctional restaurant and then trying to make it functional. Um, it's a great show to really see where those hiccups and pressure points are when trying to make a successful business.
Yeah. On I love the bear. On that subject, Wendy and all the coffee team, I'm a regular at my neighborhood coffee house in the afternoons. I make my own coffee at home, but I love to go there and work in the afternoon. And I often see that because we live in such a to-go food era now. It wasn't that way 10 years ago. It's very much that way. They do a lot of food to go. They have a lot of, Uber drivers picking things up. But whenever the coffee is, if it sits there too long, they remake it. But they have a huge menu so that it's annoying to them, but they can kind of absorb that cost of remaking the labor and the cost of a wasted coffee. But when your primary thing is coffee, if 5 people a day don't pick them up or they come late and you got to remake them, that's a serious hit to your bottom line.
It
You
is.
know? But the other side of that coin is we live in that convenience-driven pre-order online world, you know? So
Wendy, one thing I'd
Can I
say,
give your my opinion to your business, Wendy, as a customer that I love your coffee?
Yes, I know. Hi, Via. I
Um,
wanted to say I recognized you.
and I'm one of those who ask you to do the
Yeah.
online or call coffee because I'm just like right in the corner.
Yeah.
One thing that I completely understand, of course, and that's why we keep going over there because your coffee is in spectacular quality and taste, and
You.
you taste the quality, right? And it's not even on a Starbucks, not even like it's an offense called close to Starbucks. It's not.
No, not at all.
It's
I get
delicious,
matcha there, by the
amazing,
way.
and incredible. But maybe a good thing would be for neighbors, right? Because as this guy is your neighbor, so
Yeah.
my business too is your neighbor where I work now. Uh, Maybe having that flexibility for neighbors is like, oh, do you have every morning? So what time are you picking up your coffee? And as Tim said, it brings the responsibility to the customer. So if I say to you, I'm coming 10 o'clock to pick up my coffee, and I came 10:15, is my problem as a customer because you as a business, you said, okay, I will have your order of coffees for your office 10 o'clock ready to go. Right. But if I don't pick up 10 o'clock, that's my fault. And that it can be even on the fine prints line, it's like, hey, we are more than happy to do with our neighbors. Right. And this is the policy. Basically, you pretty much telling us I don't accept any bitching because it's supposed to pick up your coffee. You
yeah,
know, And I would take it. I would take that like to a heart. I'm like, yes, they do have an amazing coffee, and we gotta pick it up 10 o'clock, right? But I don't know. It's a suggestion. Could
Well,
work.
What I
yeah.
like about this comment, Bia, and being an on the ground barista for you, I don't particularly want to add in that mess with the way that we're currently operating. But Bia's got a good example for a testing ground of seeing, a small scale Seven Hills local call in kind of test run. Because my feeling right away is that you would you could increase sales. And that's what we want, right? We want to increase if you can sell more baked goods and more coffees, but
Yeah.
pretty quickly you're going to pressure up right away. You're going to pressure up against the in cafe experience. So you'd have to make that choice of scaling up and figuring a way to process those drinks to get those sales without disrupting too much the cafe business. And so I just thought I'd jump in because I thought it's an interesting comment from Bio of like a small little test ground of seeing, implementing something in a smaller way to see how it goes.
And I just jump in too with on the slide here, the customer relation management, the CRM.
Oof.
Maybe at the start, the CRM is very low tech, very local, where it's you are managing your relationships with your customers. But then as you scale, then you become more sophisticated with being able to track customers' needs and those various things. So you can then create products that are specific to your individual customer base. And so just that customer relationship component is very important. But then I also remember you guys are thinking about selling beans maybe down the road.
Well, we do sell beans,
Okay,
and
so you already
yeah,
sell the coffee.
yeah.
So maybe your online ordering component is a very limited menu. Like what Robert said, like it's specific for online. So it's the office coffee pack, or it's a bean order, whatever works best with your staff. And
Well, that's interesting. So it's like an office pack. Okay. Well, certainly, I definitely want, like Dylan, his opinion here is invaluable because he knows and he's under the gun when we've got a line out the door and then somebody slips in an order in front of somebody who's in that physical line. So we'll figure it out. I think there might be something there, and I'm certainly open to coming up with a solution if it makes sense. And
Well, I
there's a
have
lot
a,
of technology that can help, but yeah.
I have a vision, but should we move on? I don't want to.
Well,
Yeah,
let's
you know what? I got one slide and then we can, well, two slides left and then we can kind of jump in and the floor is your guys. How's that?
Yeah, I think, thank you,
Okay.
everybody, because let's get back to Tim. We are honing in on the 7 o'clock hour, which that's when we have the 30 minutes of integration, which hopefully can just be more Q&A and back and forth. But I love that this slide, Tim, you've got as Jason just pointed out, the customer relationship management. Let's face it, all those things above it are only going to benefit if we have happy customers, happy
Amen.
customers. You know,
Amen. Yep.
and one thing also I want to add is the POS, the point of sale. Even if you're selling at a farmer's market, which I know some of you will be, if you're taking credit cards with, say, Square can give you a lot of data that can be really invaluable to help you plan and make future decision. Patricia, you're going to be going through this soon enough with people getting food. Is it hot enough? The irony is the ubiquity of the fast food. I know there's mostly a burger and fries in a bag these days. I see them all the time. If my fries aren't piping hot, I'm not interested. But I see people getting bags of burger and fries and taking them and eating them 20 minutes later. So it's interesting that people don't have a problem with cold fries, but they do have a problem with cold coffee.
They do.
Yeah.
Can we do this? Because I want to get through this, but
Yes.
I actually have a thought for you, Wendy, that maybe we could talk
Oh,
about.
good.
It's okay. I just moved the slide ahead.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
So here's the thing, that when you guys are starting to look at systems, and I'm not going to beat this to death, but as you look at your different industries, and by the way, it wouldn't surprise me if they have like a solution, like an integrated accounting solution with point of sale, inventory management for, like, say, coffee shops. All right. It's a bespoke solution that interfaces. And by the way, that other line and the just to the right of the business specific solution, the APIs, application programming interfaces. This means they talk to each other, the different systems. Okay. And they're extensible and scalable, meaning if you get into a restaurant or if you get into scale, these are all considerations. You definitely want to have a cloud-based backup. I had a client of mine that had, and I told him 3 times, I said, you're going to get hacked because he had his servers on premise. Well, guess what happened? He didn't get hacked once. He got hacked twice. He was closed cumulatively for a whole month because the system wouldn't work. Okay. SaaS software is you basically rent the software for a month. And good news, bad news is, yeah, you're into that system. But the good news is you don't have to shell out huge bucks. So it's relatively affordable. I mentioned security. You need to ask about that. And then obviously cost. These are kind of like the big picture considerations as you guys look at these various systems. And you need to see what you can afford and, think back on what we've discussed and saying, okay, where does this one fit? And again, and the point here is that there is no one size fits all. Monty mentioned QuickBooks, and QuickBooks is good for a lot of different things, but you need to think about how it fits your business. Okay. I've helped a number of clients move off of QuickBooks. Okay. So for a variety of reasons. So anyways, okay, last slide. And then and I'm going to blow through these. So these are some of like the pro tips I wanted to kind of give you guys. And so here's why that statement of cash flow is so important. So business rule number one, and I paid a lot of money to learn this in business school. Don't run out of cash. Anybody want to know what rule number 2 in business is? See rule number 1. Okay. So the second one, and again, these are all kind of like little quotable quotes. These are all my little quotable quotes. It takes dough to grow. And a lot of times I'll have entrepreneurs come in and they're like, well, I want to grow my business. And it's like, well, how much money do you have? Well, I don't have a lot of money. Well, there's only a few ways to get it. You either get it from your operations, you get it from equity, meaning somebody invests into your company, or you get it from debt. All right. And those aren't always easy. So you got to keep this in mind as you start to position your business. It takes dough to grow. The other thing I would tell you is everything is negotiable. This is one thing I find with a lot of people. We live in a society right now where we don't negotiate. But if you come from other countries, this is a way of life. Okay. And I think every entrepreneur that I know it would behoove them. It would create just a ton of money for them to know how to negotiate. Right. There's a great book. It's only like that thick. It's called Getting to Yes. And I'd recommend that. It's a really short book, and it's a way to think about how to negotiate. For new business people, in fact, the word in Spanish for negotiate is negocios hombres, or businessmen, right? It's all about negotiation. This is business, guys. Okay. The one thing I saw in all my food businesses, it just would kill them, is waste. In fact, the estimate right now is that the food industry right now probably expend 4% to 10% of revenue on waste. All right. So think about those products. Every culture has it, right? Like in the Asian culture, like fried rice, they use day-old rice. Don't tell them I told you that. And then they sell it at a higher price. All right. Because they mix it up with some soy sauce. They make it salty and maybe a little sweet sometimes. But it's a way to clean out the refrigerator. And they're not wasting the rice from the day before. Okay. Thank you, Luke. I'm glad you appreciate that. Every culture has it. Chili beans, stews, Hangtown omelets, right?
Bread pudding.
Yeah. In fact, one of my food processing clients, I helped this guy buy this business out of bankruptcy. There's all kind of scripts when you're doing food processing, for those of you in food processing. And a great way to get rid of some of this stuff is you change the label on it and you send it to grocery outlet, Ross, right? All those kind of things. Great way to save a few bucks, and you don't lose money then. Okay. The other one is, and I kind of shared this about the lawyer, but if you think he or she is expensive, try buying the cheap one. Because when you get bad advice, it's really expensive. Okay. So just keep that in mind as you're vetting your professionals. Think about that. Monty's going to love this one because he's going to talk to you all about it. Know your unit costs. How much are you making? Right. One of the things that I'm going back to the Gentified story. They're arguing over a 50-cent increase in the price of their burritos. Well, the reality of it is they don't know what their costs are. Okay. And that's what's killing them. Now, granted, it's a Netflix video, but I just can't shut off who I am. But as I'm listening to this, I see the symptoms. I know the problem, right? They don't know their costs. Yeah. I can tell by the way they're making the burritos too. They're not looking at portion control. So again, know your costs. The other thing I would tell you, and maybe this goes to Wendy's point, is you have to differentiate, differentiate, differentiate. What makes you different? What makes you better? And I think the thing is, don't compete on price. But there are roughly five different dimensions that you compete on. One is price. The other one is quality, which I heard from you, that you have a quality product. The other one is service, meaning, we can get it to you quickly, right? Think Amazon service delivery, right? And then the last one is scope. We've all been to the restaurant that has like 100 different items on the menu,
Hmm.
but they're like a little one location shop, and you go like, how the hell can they make all this, right? So think about what are your primary competitive dimensions, right? So price, quality, service delivery, and scope. So think about that. Okay, the other thing I wanted to share with you guys, again, the road to hell is paved with CapEx. CapEx is capital expenditures, meaning, here, I got a client right now. The guy went out, he bought a couple really expensive vans. Those Mercedes Sprinter vans, and dolled them all up and everything like that. They're like low six figures. And then he sent them all back because when the business slowed down for him, he couldn't afford it. All right. So before you go out and spend a lot of money on things, and I see this a lot in the restaurant biz, people will drop a small fortune just to get it open. And then it's like, okay, my first day I had 5 people show up. Okay. This is what I mean by the road to hell is paved with CapEx. It's a long way to get back. So you need to think about how you're going to do that. And then I already talked about the AI tools. Okay. I'm done. How'd I
Cool.
do, Monty? Just blew through it,
Great.
didn't I?
Great. Thank you, Tim.